All right, welcome back to Pluck That. And we are here with myself, Nick Ciraldo, and Jonathan Bass and Mike Boyd. And we will be with you throughout the remainder of this special episode of Pluck That, in that it's just going to be the three of us talking about a very special topic, maintenance. Right, boys?
That's right.
Very important.
We seem to think that we know a good bit about maintenance of our instruments. And have a few things that we would like to talk about, share, and maybe even in this discussion, learn some things from each other. But hopefully, this is an opportunity for our listeners and viewers to get something out of our discussion in terms of maintenance. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, who wants to start? What tip do you have to maintain your guitars?
So yeah, I think we all think that we know a little bit how to maintain our guitars until we actually see or get a guitar returned to us from a professional who's actually maintained our guitars. And you realize, you weren't doing any harm usually, but there is an art to it, and when it's done correctly, it shows. There's no arguing with that. That being said, though, I really am a firm believer that there are a certain set of skills that we should all know. And mainly from an electric guitar point of view, I guess is what I'm quickly one can get out of their element when they move to an acoustic instrument, right? I mean, to me, that becomes a whole another skill set and something that's very specialized. But as far as electric guitars go, I'll just start by saying I won't elaborate right now, but just having basic soldering skills goes a long way. It's helped me out of a lot of pinches over the years. And I'm not a great solderer. I'm really not, but I can, I can rewire a guitar. I can fix what ails me in the moment, without necessarily getting on a waiting list and always relying on, the local repair person, to do really what's a pretty simple thing. You know what I mean? So it might be in a queue for a long time, and that person might, get it and go, this could be done if you just knew how to, do a quick little simple solder. So anyway, I'll use that to open the conversation.
I think that's good. There's a certain personal level of comfort I think we all, have in terms of our own abilities. And sometimes there's a bit of intimidation when we try to want to go beyond that. I think it is good to develop, some sort of basic skills in maintaining what we have. So, like Bass just said, you don't have to rely on someone else or wait or pay, a bench fee. I mean, sometimes, you take it into the shop, there could be something minor wrong with it, but you're still just going to, pay a fee on top of whatever the time is the repairman takes. And I think we have to know where our limitations are in terms of sometimes the level of gear we have or, what we are prepared to spend to get the gear repaired or maintained.
Yeah, I just want to highlight what both of you are saying is, you may not have the time to wait. I mean, I've had to send in an electric guitar, and 2 months later, I got the thing back, and I sure could have used that guitar during that time. And so it almost seems like if you have enough of an ability to get the thing to work, it's worth it as opposed to spending what could be, a couple $100 and many weeks of wait time.
Well, and another consideration these days, back when I first, God, I sound like the old curmudgeon here, but back in my day, when I first started playing guitar, there were multiple music shops in town. They all had reputable repair techs for various things, for guitars, for different types of amps. That I feel like is becoming less and less common in terms of I have to drive 3 hours now to visit my amp tech, and that's just to drop it off. Now he's very good. I like going to him. I love supporting him. But then I have to schedule when to pick the amp up. Another 3 hour drive there, 3 hour drive back. And on top of that, it's nice that I can drop it off at a music store that carries it the last hour to him. But when it's returned to the music store, they have a 30-day limitation. If anything is left over 30 days, they reserve the right to sell it. So there are certain times of the year where it may be hard for me to get up there and pick it up in a timely manner. There's all number of considerations I think we need to, think about these days before we make, investments, and especially serious investments in money into some of the gear that we will be purchasing.
That's pretty tough, dude. I mean, if you
Yeah,
can't get up there in 30 days, they'll sell your guitar.
Yeah, I mean they've been good, to work with. You just communicate with him, but that is one of the at one of the stores I drop off for him. That's on the desk when you walk in. Repairs left over 30 days will be sold.
You tell them I don't like that.
wow. Well, I think the reality too is what you started off with, Boyd, is that I'm very fortunate where I live to have, I mean, two that I know of. One is extremely good and extremely well known here in Memphis. But the waiting list for him is, his workload is pretty backed up, because he is in demand. He's really, really good. Amp person here in town, really good. But I could go on and on about how good they are, and maybe in another episode I will. But the reality is, I'm, I would say I'm kind of, at least in our part of the world, in the minority. You know, I mean, I really don't have to drive that far. So my point is really just to reiterate, knowing basic skills and just be willing to like jump in on, just like go buy you a $50 guitar, you know. And I understand that maybe not everyone has that, even that ability to go do that, but a cheap guitar for you to not be scared that you're gonna mess up, you know, is pretty invaluable. And honestly, if you just have like a backup guitar that you wanted to do a mod to, that you have an existing guitar, that's ready to go that you can gig with at any time. But yeah, I would definitely recommend just trying a simple mod out with, a basic solder and knowing that you've really got to work hard to do irreparable damage to that instrument. You know, please
With
don't
this,
send me your repair bills.
would this be an episode where we can also talk about sort of maintenance hacks, ways to, you know, instead of repair, but just kind of day to day stuff with your instrument? Can we talk about that too?
I
Sure,
think that's
let's do it.
perfectly appropriate.
I got a string maintenance recommendation. So on the classical guitar, the treble strings can last forever. However, they get little nicks in them from your fingernails constantly attacking them, and after a while, they get so many little nicks in them that they tend to affect your tone. It kind of sounds scratchy after a while, and that's usually when people like to change the strings. But if you wanted to, you can keep the slack that comes with the string. So instead of after stringing the guitar, don't cut all the slack off by the tuners, but keep them on, just time in a little, you know, knot or something. But detune the strings to the point where, you can take it off at the headstock, pull the string down a little bit, and retie the knot at the tie block such that there's a little extra slack down there. What that does is it moves that scratchy spot that you were playing on closer to the bridge where we don't normally play. And then that it takes the spot that was over the sound hole, which is where we typically don't play so much. and it puts it right over that kind of sweet spot where you do play. Boom, you have a like basically a new set of strings. Retie it, tighten it up, and you're good to go. You can do that like maybe 2 times. And what that does is just prolongs the life of the string and you still sound good. I had no idea about that until a former student of mine, Daniel De Lima. So shout out to Daniel. Thank you very much for that recommendation. And that has really cut down the cost of things because you can buy treble strings and bass strings separately. You can get little 3 packs of each. So I usually buy 2 packs of bass strings for every one set of trebles, cutting down on cost.
Very good hack.
What about setting up a guitar? What do you guys have to say about setting up an electric guitar? Things that the common guitarist should know or can do on their own.
Well, for
Uh,
me, um, a lot of times the I don't like to mess with the truss rod. I've never felt very comfortable with that once it's set. I'm not comfortable with doing fret work, things of that nature. That being said, certain things just to maintain the playability of the guitar. For me, if I have a guitar with a tremolo, I'm not a fan of the floating tremolo. I've played lots of guitars where it stays in tune really well. I like to have mine decked, which is where the tremolo comes to rest on the top of the guitar. I mean, you can't pull the tremolo and make the pitches go sharp, but the advantage is it will return back, more in a more true manner to where you left it if you dive on it. So with that, it takes a little bit of skill to be able to adjust the tension on those springs. Sometimes being able to play around, buying lighter tension strings or using fewer strings or even cranking the hook screws into the guitar or loosening up a little bit more. So ideally, it's stable right until the moment you push on the tremolo, so you don't have to fight it to push it too hard. But it's also not so tight, or so loose, I should say, that when you go to bend a string, it pulls the bridge up with the tension you're bending on. And that takes a little bit of playing around with to get that right, so you do keep the other strings in tune. So that's something that took me a good bit of time to really learn how to balance out. But for someone who does have a guitar that's not a hard tail, I think these are considerations that they want to explore, especially when it comes to, not having to take it in every time you want to make adjustments with like a lighter string gauge or a heavier string gauge, things that guitarists are constantly kind of fooling around with.
Yeah, you bring the last part about that, I think is important to highlight because you could send your guitar in and they could set it up, but it may not be exactly how you want it set up for your playing style. People should know, or they already do, that there are different types of string tension, different styles of guitar, even though you might all be playing electric. And I think having this ability to work with your instrument gets you closer to how you want to play it, maybe more quickly than taking it to somebody in certain cases, at least.
yeah, I think quite often, I know I'm just being a broken record right now, but when you get to the point of not being afraid anymore, that sounds dramatic, but I mean, really, people are afraid of like messing something up, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you mess something up where you just don't know where to go anymore, as far as intonating the guitar, setting it up, or whatever, you can just take it to someone, right? But I think a lot of people are so afraid that they don't even try. I get that. I really do because you don't want to. It's so easy to be afraid that you're going to do something irreparable. But like Boyd was saying, I mean, you can find everything that he was saying on YouTube, for crying out loud now, and it's testable stuff, if you see them doing something stupid, then don't do that, but in general, it's testable, and so that's the beauty of YouTube in that particular setting. And here you are on YouTube watching us. Um, but
Well, I mean, this is a brilliant point too. That there are so many resources available to people today to give you, some sort of knowledge about how to do things properly. And we can think about all the tutorials online about how to, I don't know, fix a flapper on a toilet. There's all sorts of things like that for guitar too. That you can see someone doing it. You can get hints and tips. And another thing you brought up, Jonathan, is intonation. Now, for electric guitar, in general, it is much easier for just the average person to learn how to well intonate their guitar. And I think that is an important skill. Something I saw on I don't know if it was one of Anderton's videos, something like that, where they used the word train, which meant tune, relief, action, intonation, and in for noodle to play. And there is a certain order in which you want to be able to do some of these basic things. The first one, just get the guitar in tune with itself and see how well the guitar is in tune. And a lot of times if you do have the confidence and maybe even the need to play with the truss rod, that's where that relief is, so you can get the action just right with raising the saddles and all that. So every time you do something, you're going to want to retune it before you play with that. And really, that intonation is the last step in that. A lot of guitars will already be, set up with good relief and action. But every time you even raise and lower the action with those Allen screws, you're putting more tension on the strings or less tension. You're going to have to retune it. And then once you get it where you want it, then is the time to actually slide that intonation. It's really the last step, but I think it's a good process to go through to make sure you're not doing something that is going to make you have to take two steps back and redo something before you get to that point. So little things like that you can find online, little hints about how to be just effective in terms of how you maintain your guitar, I think is very helpful.
I would say another overlooked thing that's really simple to mess with, that it's not addressed when if I was to look up videos like just addressing the stuff that we're talking about right now, is pickup height and sort of dialing in your tone and getting balance there. The Well, first of all, every guitar is different, every pickup is different, so that is a personal thing. However, what's not all that personal is that point of diminishing return where you think it's like closer is better. That's something that I see that every now and then beginners maybe overlook. Either they just don't care and it's like all the way away from the strings and no thought at all has been put into how far the pickup is away from the strings, or closer is better, and you realize that it's just, I don't know. The math was explained to me at one point actually, but I forgot.
Okay, so I'm relatively new to the electric guitar compared to y'all, but I heard that if the pickup gets too high, the magnetic pull between the pickup and the strings start to interfere with the strings ringing. Like it slows the ringing down more quickly than it does naturally. Is that true?
It does have an impact.
Depending on the pickup.
Yeah. However strong that magnet is, the closer it gets, it will have an impact on that.
Hmm.
But another thing to think about with pickup height too, that's something that wasn't really covered in that little train thing I just mentioned, is if the action is quite high, maybe the pickup height is correct, but when you bring that action down, it's going to bring it closer to the pickup, and you might have to adjust the pickup height to keep that balance between the two pickups in check, and even sometimes to keep it from bumping into the pickup. I had a case one time where I just had a setup done and checked out, but when you fretted the note, it pulled the string down, and the closer you got to the bridge, you started hearing this just vibration. And what it was literally the string vibrating against one of the screws, pole piece screws on the
Yeah,
pickup.
right.
So I had to lower the pickup to get it away from that. And it drove me nuts for the better part of 30 minutes until I figured out where that was coming from.
Some beginners, are going to listen to this and maybe learn something. This is once you play for any amount of time, you kind of realize, okay, there's, the fretboard. I'm sorry if this is cross section of the fingerboard, right? There's a radius, all right. So, uh, especially a lot of older fenders have a more severe radius, right? Like what is it, seven and a
Seven and
quarter,
a half.
Boyd, seven,
Yeah.
7.5, right? So wait a minute, I think it's 7.25. Anyway,
It may
doesn't
be.
matter.
I just see
It's a
seven and a
it's
half.
a pretty
I think
it's
it's
curvature, right? And so
I
if you
think
if you go
it's
down and
seven and three
look at
eighths. I think it's
oh,
I
okay,
think, I think
yeah.
it's
So
seven and three eighths.
so yeah, so if you look at your pickups, excuse me, single coil strap pickups that maybe accentuate that curve, right? Is it the Texas Special? I don't have any, but Boyd, help me out.
Yeah, and those will have
That
the differing
the,
pole
the
piece heights
elevated
on it.
D and G
Hmm.
pole. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. So and a lot of them do that, but that's what it's for, and so just to be conscious of what the radius example, for example, on your guitar is, how to maybe adjust, each individual pole. I mean, like my GNL has individual pole pieces that you can adjust, right? Whereas the pickups that I just mentioned, yeah, there's sweet spots where you still have to adjust them from the sides, right? And they've already been compensated for the curvature of the fingerboard. But anyway, I'm talking in circles, I think.
No, no.
I actually am talking in circles because of the radius of the
Nice. I got another
in
classical hack,
circles and about circles.
right? Got another
Okay,
classical
no,
hack.
what is that?
When you go from electric guitar to classical, I think should use different tools to cut the strings. And so electric guitars, you probably have like a pliers type thing with a little wire cutter in the middle or something like that. At least that's what I use. Kind of like a small needle nose pliers with a little cutting blade near the fulcrum. You can use that on a classical guitar, but oftentimes you have to get pretty close to the bridge to cut the slack after you tie that little knot around the tie block. I use fingernail clippers. I have a
Mm.
set that I use just for guitars, so I don't work on my toenails and then go right to the guitar. But you're able to get very close and just get a very precise, careful cut, so you don't
Mm.
accidentally gouge the soundboard. Not that it affects the sound too much, but it's like that's like a permanent gash. And to
No,
that
that's good. That's a yeah, that's a good consideration.
Thanks. And to that point, further, I've used so there's this kind of plastic film that you can buy that people like to put on the soundboard to protect the guitar from hitting the soundboard with your nails or something like that. There's a brand that is called Klingon. Play on words there. It literally through static electricity, is that what it's called? It sticks to the
Hmm.
soundboard, and I take a piece of that and I place it right at the base of the bridge, so that when I'm doing those ties, you don't get so-called string burn from the string, flapping down on the soundboard while you're tying it. Something can happen, and it just, especially the metal strings, can hit. And after a while, changing strings over and over again, you can get quite a number of burns there. So I place that down to just kind of protect the soundboard when I'm changing strings.
I can't wait till we have pro luthiers and technicians on here that completely obliterate everything that we're saying right now.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you think you're right, but really, this is how we do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, kind of along those lines, the type of guitar is a big consideration in terms of where we want to be able to get our service. And like with an electric guitar or basic setups on, acoustic, steel string acoustic and electric, there are several guys we have in town here that are really good at what they do. More detailed work on either of those instruments, I have to drive close to Jackson to see my guitar tech there. And like I said, an amp tech, 3 hours away. If something, if I needed something done with my classical guitars, fortunately, both the makers of the guitars I have now, I can still get in touch with and get it back to them if I need to, which is kind of preferred. But the guitar I just sold, that gentleman died a couple of years ago, and if I wanted it taken care of, I don't know where I would go to or who I would take the guitar to. Nick, I'd probably lean on you very heavily for that. Fortunately, I haven't had to do that, but that is a real consideration in the back of my mind a lot of times.
Well, first of all, Boyd, you can lean on me whenever you want. You're just down the road from me. Secondly, I think that folks should know that guitar builders often do repair work. And so I've taken my current guitar. I happen to be in the Houston area, and I needed something was wrong with one of my tuners. The tuning button sort of broke loose from the tuner itself. Like I was turning it and turning it, and nothing happened. And it just so happened that there was this luthier in the Houston area, and he was able to help me out. And it was just a great, bit of luck there. If I had something wrong with my classical guitar, let's say there was a crack, and there you would need to fix it with a staple, which is a little piece of wood that goes underneath the soundboard, kind of glued to the bottom side of it to keep it from cracking further. I think there's a number of people that you can take it to. There are also classical guitar builders that have that's maybe like half of what they do. There's a builder in the Boston area, Aaron Green, who makes excellent concert guitars, but he also restores vintage instruments going back to, you know, early Hausers, Fletas, all kinds of super high end collector's instruments. He's able to, really break them down to their, and build them back up again. He does beautiful work. So there's a lot of people out there that can do that. But again, it goes back to time, money, trust. There's a great deal of trust. I mean, to your point, Boyd, I would much rather send my broken guitar to the person who built it than anyone else, because they know it. They're the ones that built it. They know everything about that instrument. And so there's probably a learning curve no matter who you take it to if it's somebody else. But I would say, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, usually luthiers are known for good repair work as well.
Money and time with any instrument or amp. The reality is if you're gigging and relying on performing for, any part of your living, it doesn't take you long to realize that you're going to have a backup and, backup and up two backups, both guitars and amps, right? I mean, it sucks, but that's what you're going to have to do because inevitably you're probably going to have a tube amp. You're probably going to have a nice guitar that's going to have just simply to be serviced, right? And you're going to be without it for months, because you're going to want a quality person. A quality person is going to have a backlog of work, or simply you're just going to have to travel to go get it, go get it taken care of. So, you're always going to have a backup. And so we're often accused of accumulating gear, but there's a certain percentage of it, probably a large percentage of it, really, that is it's really practical.
Yeah, if you're hoping to become a professional gigging musician, backup gear all the way up to the instruments themselves is a must. Imagine your
Yeah.
guitar breaks the day of a gig and you have nothing to do. I mean, you don't get paid. So, Bass, are you saying that I should buy a second concert guitar as a backup?
Nick, I'm saying you should buy a second concert guitar.
Okay. Can you call my wife tomorrow morning and explain that to her?
No.
Okay. I'll pay you $1,000.
All right.
So I have a little maintenance thing for classical guitars because we're talking about, the fear of adjustment and that kind of thing. So oftentimes people will buy an entry level classical guitar if you're getting into the hobby, getting into the style. And Oftentimes these guitars are set up pretty well, but sometimes the action is pretty high. Most times they just take a very basic bridge saddle and just slap it onto the bridge and string it up and send it out. When you first get sort of an entry level classical guitar, just know that they put a pretty cheap set of strings on. So if you're in doubt, put on some new strings, the string tension that you like, and see how you like it then. After that point, if you still feel like it's hard to play, especially for the left hand, you can file the bridge saddle down. You can get either a metal file or you can get just a coarse piece of sandpaper, put it on a flat surface like a table, and just slowly go back and forth and just kind of file it little by little until you get to the height that you want. Now,
From the top or bottom, Nick?
good question. From the bottom, from the bottom. Now, just like when you guys were talking about messing around with the various stages of setting up a guitar, I was going to say earlier, Boyd, when you were talking about the train process, that takes time. Like if you're gonna mess with that, it's not like okay, I did it, now I'm done, I can walk away. You need to devote like at least an hour because it's like a lot of trial and error and focus and listening and that kind of thing. Well, the same thing is the case with the classical, but it's even harder in a way in that you have to completely take the strings off or completely, take the tension off, pull that saddle out, which is sometimes really tightly placed in there, file it down, put it back in, restring it, stretch the strings and then play on it a little bit. And you have to kind of sit with it because, when you change that height, you can't go back necessarily, so easily. And then just kind of, so you need like an hour or two to kind of go through that. Conversely, if you get a saddle that is too low and you're buzzing a lot, you don't like the action, it's too light, you can actually raise the action by taking little slips of paper or a very thin piece of wood. Sometimes people use balsa wood, something really thin as like a shim that goes in between the saddle and the bridge. The only problem with that is you can get so high if you can see that, like if this is the seat, the little slot where the saddle goes in, and this is the saddle, and you're pushing it up by slipping a little piece of paper underneath it, you don't want to get so high that the majority of the saddle is coming out, because then it can start to bend toward the strings and break either itself or more usually break part of the bridge itself, and then you're really screwed. So be careful with that.
You brought up a good point there about putting the shims of wood underneath the bridge. Balsa wood, is a good option for that because it's easy to cut and shape, pretty easy to find. You can go to the Dollar General and get, one of those little balsa wood airplane kits and use that. And if it is too high, getting a nice round pencil, it's such soft wood, you can just roll it over it to kind of squish it down and compress it a little bit. So those are all good options, absolutely.
I used to go to a tobacco store and ask for the wood that they would use to wrap cigars with, because that was just thin enough, smelled great, and it was free. So they would just give it to me, and I could
Wow, that's great too.
snip off a piece.
Bass, not to, circle back too far, but before we get too far from it, what you said about having backup gear. Nick had a guitar festival and workshop earlier this year where it was, what's in your bag? What do you take with you to gigs to make sure you have what you need and spare equipment too? And I think most of us learn this from trial and error. We've been at a gig, something goes wrong, and oh my gosh, I don't have
Trial
it.
and error, aka the hard way.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that might be a good topic of conversation sometime, too. What, from our experiences, what do we, keep with us to make sure we can keep going and keep the gig going when something does go wrong?
And I gotta admit, sometimes it depends on the gig. Oh no, I can't play. Just kidding. I never do that.
No, never, never.
Never. Are we talking about this now or at a later date?
I think that's a topic unto itself
Okay,
sometime.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah, I think this is an ongoing discussion. I don't think we have to get it all out in one episode, but that's a good dose of information for our listeners about guitar maintenance, whether it's electric or acoustic, classical. The bottom line here, I think, in this episode is that there is a lot that you can do. There are resources readily available from YouTube to other places online where you can get some of this stuff done today for free or for very little money. And obviously, if it gets to a point where it's beyond your ability, you can bring it to a professional. But there's more that you can do at home than you may think. And those are just
absolutely. And we didn't even get into amp repair.
Yeah, I think
How
that's another
capacitors
topic.
can kill you.
Right, yeah. There's a lot more safety issues,
Yeah, there really
when we
is.
do get into electronics.
Which we need to have, we need to have some amp people on the show. I know I have at least one that I know I can reach out to here in Memphis that works on all my stuff, and
And I think that's a good
incredible.
topic, to explore some other time. Our own experiences with, say, electronics, amps, and even pedals and things of that nature, so we can get the most out of what we have.
are we gonna have to start that episode with like a little warning screen? Like,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll be said multiple times because yeah, you can get into danger zones with amp repair. Yeah,
Yeah, and really get out of your depth, I think, much more quickly when it comes to amps and electronics.
yeah,
all right, well then amps are to come. And I think that is enough for now. We'd like to thank you for listening to Pluck That, episode 5 on maintenance. Please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can also check us out on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple. And that is going to do it for Pluck That. Thanks very much.